Isn't that sporty? We're off. Motorcars were designed and built to provide personal transportation. But before long, they were being used for another purpose. These early days of the motor car live on in the exciting world of classic cars today. Today, classic cars are bought and sold, found and restored, collected and pampered, and raced until their wheels fall off. These motor cars have a character all their own. Some of beauty and grace, others of power and speed. This is a world of nostalgia and excitement that can be felt directly through the steering wheel of a supercar like this Bentley. All over the world, motor cars like this one are appreciated and cared for like nothing else. What a way to go.
Hello, I'm Sterling Moss, and I'll be your guide through the fascinating world of classic cars. The whole idea began almost a century ago. Since then, an inseparable bond has developed between man and his invention. Today, nowhere is this bond more obvious than in the world of classic cars. Somehow it seems that everyone regards them differently. Some have a mild appreciation of their beauty, whilst others see the cars as a hobby, or even as a sport. But to the enthusiast, these cars are more than a hobby. They're more than a sport. For them, the world of classic cars has become a way of life.
In the world of classic cars, this is an important event and not really so uncommon. A young chap, Chris Leyden, the car, a J2 Allard. The end of a long trip and the beginning of the rebirth of a classic. The motor car is half sport, half racing machine, built in England in the late 40s and powered by an enormous American V8 engine. 20 years ago, this car was considered the fastest genuine sports car in the world. The very sight of a car in this untidy condition would make most of us run the other way. But to a classic car enthusiast, particularly one who cares about old sports and racing cars, this is a real find. Chris has bought one of the few J2 Allards that still exist in any condition. This car is a classic, with a unique past that sets it apart as a supercar. In its day, the J2 Allard was a car to be reckoned with, even at Le Mans. I was driving car number 22, a C-Type Jaguar, another supercar, straight on past the second turn. An Allard was right behind me. I glanced in my mirror. It was gone. The Allard ploughed down an embankment and couldn't finish the race. At any rate, the real fame of the J2 Allard was not at Le Mans, but in the United States, at Watkins Glen and Sebring, where it dominated the major sports car racing events.
Old cars have played a significant role in my life. I became acquainted with them at an early age when my father always had one around the house. And so inevitably, I'd find myself underneath tinkering away.
Since Chris became interested in classic cars, he has rebuilt several, always trying to keep the ones he likes the most. Inside his barn, he keeps 2 French sports cars that he rebuilt and still owns. In one corner is a Grand Prix Bugatti that he doesn't own.
I guess the best thing about old cars is that I enjoy working on them. It also permits me, when I'm young, to travel and to meet people. And sometimes I even find one. I found a Bugatti in a field once, about a year ago, completely neglected. I brought it home to my barn and got it running. I spent a good deal of time trying to locate the owner, and when I did, I found he didn't want to sell it. So I just keep it for him. I really don't understand. He hasn't even come to see it.
Chris believes a motor car has an integrity to be preserved. And if ever a car deserved preservation, it would certainly be a Bugatti. At the turn of the century, Ettore Bugatti, creator of these famous cars, left his home in Milan, Italy, to build a factory in Molsheim, France. There, for more than 40 years, he constructed and often raced a supercar that became a legend. From 1920 to 1930, his cars overshadowed all others on the racing circuits of Europe. In 1927 alone, an astonishing 800 races were won by Bugattis. They won in France, in England, and Belgium, Spain, Switzerland, and Germany. They won the Mille Miglia and Monza in Italy, and on the streets of Monte Carlo, Bugatti cars roared to victory. Bugatti built several different racing and touring models, many of which are considered the fastest and most beautiful machines ever built. There were a great many racing cars built during this era, like the famous P2 Alpha, the American Miller Special, the German Auto Union, the British 3-litre Bentley, and others too numerous to mention. This was the golden age of racing. Today, many of these exciting cars have been reproduced in scaled-down versions to accommodate the youngest of enthusiasts. Of course, all exciting cars are not of the racing variety. Arriving here at New Hope, Pennsylvania, are many sports and touring classics to be displayed at the Concours d'Elegance.
What year are you? 28. 28? Yeah. You're going to be...
Judging events like this one for excellence in restoration have become extremely popular throughout the world. Here we can find people with every degree of involvement in classic cars, from the casual observer to the dyed-in-the-wool enthusiast. People who appreciate these fine cars, whether they own one or not, frequent many events like this one at New Hope. Even before all the cars arrive, preparation for judging begins. It's quite common to see a judge inspecting while the owner is still underneath polishing the drive shaft.
We're checking paint and car finish now. For rough, wavy surface, peeling, fading, pitch, wrong color, and striping. I see we have a few problems right in here of painting. Some pits on the painting. Wheels and tires, the condition of the wheel parts, hubcaps, right size, unsafe tires, and alignment. How about the front? Body, fenders, and frame for rough signs of welding, patches under fender, bumpers, sag, body not straight, and non-authentic body. That means getting under. What do you think?
The Queen's Guard will never undergo a tougher inspection.
There they are. What do you say we get a nice big head? There she is. The Queen and her court.
There were more than 3,000 different cars built between the turn of the century and 1950. And whatever the make, all cars are judged on authenticity and exactness of restoration. If one plans to win in a competition of this sort, an extraordinary degree of attention must be paid to every detail of the car's restoration. A 1909 Buick won Best of the Show at New Hope. This car is as authentic as the day it was built. Its restoration began 5 years ago. At that time, many of its original parts needed to be replaced. Several of these parts, including this authentic hooter, were found by searching through automotive flea markets like this one. Every year, from all over the United States, more than 150,000 car buffs searching for everything from a tail lens to an entire car converge on the small town of Hershey, Pennsylvania. The Antique Automobile Club's annual show at Hershey gives you an idea of just how popular classic cars have become. This 50-acre flea market resembles a modern-day gold rush where, for 4 days, classic car owners rummage through the largest automotive flea market in the world. If there is one central warehouse for American classic car paraphernalia, Hershey is it. There are many smaller flea markets, but this one has a decided advantage, for if the part you need still exists, it's probably here. The only problem is finding it. Many of the people who come here aren't looking for a particular car part. Often they come here just for the atmosphere, but end up taking home a souvenir, like an authentic Woolly, or an early motoring magazine, even an old gas pump. Here, an enthusiast can lose himself in a world of chrome and brass, and what seems to be endless rows of fenders, headlamps, instruments, license plates, tires, and owner's manuals. It's a good wager that you could haul the chassis of almost any American motor car built before 1940 in at one gate of the show and rebuild it from the steering wheel to the running board by the time you reach the other side. Hershey may be the best place to look for an American car part, but if you're rebuilding a British classic like an Allard, you'll have to look elsewhere. Before Chris can determine what replacements are needed for his car, he must first take it apart. This isn't the most glamorous phase of the rebirth of a classic, but it is the most essential. You can be certain that a car, neglected for years, will offer some degree of resistance at first. But with patience and a good set of tools, you can work wonders. Over the years, there's been an extraordinary distribution of classic motor cars. Foreign classics, no matter what country you live in, offer an extra degree of fascination. They also, of course, offer a certain degree of difficulty when trying to obtain spare parts. So if you're looking for spare parts for a British classic like the Allard, London's a good place to start. But here, as in the United States, old car parts are seldom found in a big city phone directory. So you head out for the country. Not far from London, in almost any direction, on almost any weekend, you can find the English equivalent of an American flea market. But there's one difference. Give an Englishman wheels and he'll find some place to race them, and a flea market is no exception. At the Ardingly Auto Jumble, the interest in old vehicles has become a family affair. Here the children are entertained by tractor racing and the sound of calliopes. Meanwhile, many of their parents search through piles of old car parts in the flea market. Finding authentic parts is one of the biggest problems when rebuilding an old car. There are few authentic parts remaining for early British motor cars, and today many are needed. In order to provide these necessary replacements, great numbers of ailing motor cars suffered the indignity of being dismantled so that others could survive. But even this avenue of obtaining parts is quickly being eliminated. Terry Bone is an international dealer in classic MG motor cars and spares. He knows the problem well.
We first started business about 3 years ago, but before that we used to hitchhike home from school every night, save £0.50 a night when it was pounds, shillings and pence, and then we started collecting old bits and pieces of engines and parts of cars, and then finally we bought a complete car in 1960, and after that we bought another car and it went on. We sell cars and spares to about 26 different countries all over the world, in particular in America where they love the old cars. The main thing is trying to get hold of parts for these old cars. And some of the parts are just unobtainable. You have to make new parts. And it's a case of shopping around for the prices. If you've got time, you're okay. But time is the biggest factor.
To an enthusiast who is interested in restoring a car to its authentic beginning, the thought of a newly made part is strictly the last resort. That's why they travel all over the world looking for the real thing. Unfortunately, some of the real things have unreal prices, like this $600 radiator shell. You wouldn't mind paying for it, though, if you owned one of these cars. If one considers the Bugatti the king of the racing supercars, then surely the title for touring cars must go to the Rolls-Royce. The members of the Rolls-Royce Owners Club meet for a concours show on the grounds of Blenheim Palace every year. If the show seems a bit quiet, it's probably because Sir Henry Royce had a thing about noise, especially in the cars that he built. The greatness of the Rolls-Royce was not magic, but rather a sense of pride, a pride that Sir Henry Royce instilled in each and every man in his employ. Henry Royce once said, "I never worry about selling a bad car, because the doorman just wouldn't let it out." Just as things began to go smoothly, the rain came down and put a halt to the entire affair. But the rain never stops a hill climber. The Vintage Sports Car Club's annual hill climb event has gone on regardless of rain for years. True road racing has never been permitted in England. Therefore, hill climbs on private property like this one at Shelsley Walsh are very popular with amateur racing enthusiasts. It's quite a contrast to the spit and polish of the concours shows. The English, though, love to race their old cars. Dozens of racing events are held on hills like this one every year in England, frequently with complete disregard to possible costly breakdowns. Some cars and their drivers have raced every year, mostly in the rain, since the circuit was built some 40 years ago. For many young people who want to race their old cars, amateur events like this one at Shelsley Walsh serve well, but for some reason lack the competitive atmosphere of an all-out racetrack. Many older enthusiasts remember just such a track that was built 20 miles south of London and called Brooklands. This was Brooklands, the first concrete racetrack in the world. It was built in 1907, and for 30 years it was the home of thousands of amateur race drivers. Today, there are few reminders of what a great place this once was. On this scarred and disjointed bank of earth and concrete, there once raced such cars as Count Saprowski's famous Chitty Bang Bang. Many of the older amateur drivers got together several years ago and erected a monument to Brooklands. Dudley Gagan is one of those drivers who remember the track well.
Brooklands was conceived at a supper party in 1906 held at Sutton Place. The reason of the supper party, the conversation took the turn as to why British cars were not doing very well on the continent and the Gordon Bennett races, and it came to light that we hadn't got a test track. Lock King, who was a wealthy landowner and owned Brooklands in Surrey and a lot of property down to Sussex, said, if it's a track we want, we will have a track. And in 14 months, Brooklands was built and opened. And this is a remarkable feat, which I don't think could possibly be repeated today. It survived World War I, unfortunately did not survive World War II, as the aircraft industry took it over during the war and still own it. I, for one, and many hundreds of others, deeply regret the loss of this circuit.
There are still some short sections of track left to drive on. There were trees planted in the concrete banking in 1941 to camouflage the site from German bombing raids. By 1947, the aircraft industry had all but abandoned the track at Brooklands, leaving behind the remains of a war. The track was rendered virtually irreparable.
The cars used to come along here from under the Members Bridge over the first complex.
For years, Brooklands was the home of British motoring. Amateur racing drivers came not only from England, but from all over Europe to compete. The track was built for two reasons. The excuse was that England needed a place to test the new cars, but the purpose was to have a track where one could race his neighbour. Both men and women were welcome to race here. I remember that part well. Brooklands was the most unique track ever built. Big cars raced little cars, touring and family cars raced sports cars, and they all raced together. Handicapping was the order of the day. And of course, there was always a bit of friendly wagering. The whole thing got rather confusing at times, but it was great fun. For a few shillings, anybody could bring his car here and race about all day until he or his machine gave up. There were also some professional racing events held at Brooklands, like the British Grand Prix and the double 12-hour race held over 2 days. These events were often won by the huge British Bentleys. In 1907, this 3-mile track was constructed of 200,000 tons of reinforced concrete. That cost $1 million a mile even then. The construction of the track was a considerable engineering achievement, but it proved to be a financial disaster, for it never even managed to pay for itself. To those who came here and raced, though, all that sort of thing didn't really matter. Today, hundreds of old-timers and young people have organized a Brooklands Reunion Day. Once a year, they gather their great machines along the old finishing straight at Brooklands. Again, it's a family affair. smell of racing fuel, benzene and alcohol fill the air as the drivers warm up their engines. Excitement grows, and they're off. The very early days of the track are remembered fondly by a record-breaking motorcyclist known to Brooklands as Bob.
My uncle, he was gamekeeper for Lock Kings, who owned the place before Brooklands was built. And as a kid, I used to come here and watch them building it. And then I was apprenticed with a man who used to do motorcycle racing and automatically became a rider on here, and that was back in 1920. Well, now you take Brooklands and take this crowd that you've got here today. It'll prove how popular Brooklands was in the old days. And all this wonderful machinery. They're these youngsters that can't remember anything about it, yet they're all flocking here to see this. So you can guess what a wonderful array was in my day, back in 1920. There's the proof. Look round and you'll see.
It's impossible to race on what remains of the old track, so the sporting enthusiasts take their cars to the abandoned airstrip in the centre for a bit of drag racing. A track like Brooklands was the product of a time gone by when cars depended on men rather than the other way round. This is the Palace House of Beaulieu, situated on a 10,000-acre estate near the Isle of Wight along the southern coast of England. The estate is the new home of British motoring, and the palace is the residence of Britain's foremost automotive enthusiast, Lord Montagu.
Many people refer to our family as the motoring Montagus, and I think this can be said to be true. For my father was one of the first pioneer motorists of Great Britain, owning his first car as early as 1898, and later dedicated the whole of his life to motoring and the motorist. For me, I have spent the last 20 years of my life building up a motor museum here at Beaulieu. When I first opened the house here to the public in 1952, I put a few cars in the front hall of the house as memory of my father's life's work.
Not far from the palace house are the ruins of Beaulieu Abbey, built in the 13th century. The abbey was constructed to house an order of Cistercian monks and lay brothers. Peaceful farming activities and scholastic endeavours went on until 1538, when King Henry VIII decided that the stones of the large buildings here would serve England better as military fortifications. The buildings were taken down. Over the years, Lord Montagu has brought new life to Beaulieu. Anyone for a bit of follow my leader? One needn't ask why these enthusiasts like their cars. Dozens of classic car events like this one for these fantastic little Austin 7s are held on the Beaulieu rally fields every year. Seems they've lost their leader. When things calm down, the serious business of time trials begins. The Austins prove their maneuverability by driving through an obstacle course. It's amazing how hard they push these old cars. Here, it's apparent you needn't go rushing out and buy a Rolls Royce to enjoy owning a classic car. Few of these Austins were purchased for more than $300. Many provide not only weekend sport, but daily transportation. More than 200 cars showed up this day for judging and time trials. And even in the rain, everything went off as planned. Today on Lord Montagu's estate is a dress-up affair for the grand opening of a very special motoring attraction.
Here we are at Bewley, where all these cars, which are moving off now for a cavalcade, have all come from all over England to pay tribute to Lord Montagu for building this fantastic place. In here we've got all types of cars, racing cars, all from the past. Old cars, newer ones, and ones that are parts of history. And here they go. We've got cars from the Model T Ford that you've just seen right through to the Silver Ghost Rolls Royce. Let's go and see them.
Many of the guests invited to the opening of the museum are England's most dedicated enthusiasts, some of whom have even donated a car to the museum's collection. The cars outside are as beautiful as those inside. During the cavalcade, Lord Montagu inspects the museum before the official opening by His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent.
The truth is that when I first started the museum, I had absolutely no idea that it was going to grow so large or so important as it has in fact done. But from those very early days, we've grown to be one of the largest museums in the world. I feel very fortunate in having assembled all these wonderful cars. It will give me very great pleasure to share them with anybody who wishes to see them here at Bewley.
The formal opening concludes 3 years of intensive effort by Lord Montagu that has enabled Bewley to become the home of England's first national motor museum. The museum houses 130 beautiful motor cars, motorcycles and commercial vehicles. With this addition, Bewley has become one of the most exciting motoring centres in the world. At the end of the ceremonies, it's back to motoring, as Lord Montagu takes the Duke of Kent and other dignitaries for a last spin around the estate. Bewley is expected to host thousands of tourists and classic car enthusiasts every year. As more and more people are beginning to appreciate these fine machines, museums like this one are being built all over the world.
The only way to appreciate one of these fine old cars, really, is to get in it and drive one for yourself. So I think I'll have a go now. This is a 3-litre car, and believe it or not, it was built 3 years before I was born. So, here we are, let's get in. Not bad, there's plenty of room to get in. Switch on, put on my hat, so that looks sporty. Now we pump it up. We've got to get it to 1 pound pressure on there. Right, now you'll start it. I'm driving this fantastic old car. This old car, as it says on this plaque here, Dr. J.D. Bengerfield, is one of Benji's old cars. One of the true Le Mans machines, actually, a 3-litre. And you can see this lever here released the oil from this tank so it would go into the engine. So that in the long distance race, you could keep the engine full up with oil if you needed it. Now, it's got various gauges, as you can see, on the controls. There's one here on the dashboard. Hang on, take the next gear. Did you hear that? That's the hooter. It's really, I must say, it really is something to drive a thing like this. It's very, very, very high-geared steering. You notice, look, I'm hardly moving the steering wheel. You'll see as I go around this corner. And of course, I have to continually pump the thing up here, keeping up the pressure in the fuel tank, which is at the back. And now I'm going to have to change down. There he goes. Listen to that gearbox. Quite a noisy type of gearbox. That's third gear. And I have to shout to hear over it. Revs come up. I think the great thing about this machine is that every time you manage to get a gear change like that one that's clean without a horrible graunching noise, you really feel that you've achieved something. I mean, quite frankly, when you've driven this, you can say, well, you can have all your automatic gearboxes and you can do what you like. Boy, this gives me pleasure. Chris discovered this Czechoslovakian Tatra the same way that he came across the Bugatti that he keeps in his barn. Many old cars have been found in fields and other unlikely places, looking even worse than this. If Chris had more time, he would have taken it home. But finding the owner of this car could have taken years. Practically all classics that we enjoy today have at one time or another looked like this. Scarcely resembles a car. To Chris and many enthusiasts, there's only one way of going about the whole thing. After all, the quality of a rebuilt classic is equal to the sum of its restored parts.
Old cars just fascinate me. I enjoyed rebuilding them to the way they used to be. There was one thing I don't like, and that's having to sell one. I've been able to keep two of the cars I appreciate the most. I'd like to keep them all, but inevitably one must go.
The rebirth of the classics has come about through the time and effort of many enthusiasts. The time and effort given to these cars cannot be counted in dollars and cents. However, in some respects, classic cars have become big business. This weekend on the 110-acre campus of Cabrini College in Radnor, Pennsylvania, classic cars are big business. This is arrival day for 200 fine vehicles to be sold at the world's largest classic car auction. Many of the cars are owned by dealers, others by individuals, and they arrive from all parts of the United States. This Ford Coupe came all the way from Alabama and will fetch a fine price. At auction, prices will range from a few $100s for cars like these to over $50,000 for supercars like the P1 Rolls-Royce, Locomobile, V16 Cadillac, and a Boattail Packard. For the special interest buyer, there's a 1910 fire engine, a London transport bus, and a World War I Renault tank. There's also a Grand Prix Bugatti and Chris's J2 Allard. This is a two-day affair, the first day being set aside for arrival and inspection of the cars by enthusiastic spectators and potential buyers. Here are cars of all nations and people from all walks of life, fascinated by the world of classic cars. Many of the sellers have restored their own cars. They display a special sense of pride. While sellers are busy making their cars attractive, buyers are busy wondering what they're worth. The price of a classic depends largely on the make, model, condition, and degree of originality. But before auction, it's impossible to determine what they will sell for. You can't test drive a car here. The best you can do is inspect it as closely as possible, cross your fingers, and hope that nobody wants it as much as you do. In this field, there are Duesenbergs and Cords, Chevrolets and Pontiacs, Jaguars and Bentleys, Fiats, Alfa Romeos, Renaults, Peugeots, Mercedes-Benz, and 63 other fine marks, a car to match everyone's taste. Inspection goes on throughout the day and into the evening.
$50 more. I'm at $3,950. I'm at $3,900 buddy. You better get $50 more. You better get $3,950. At $39 a bid, you better get $50 more. $3,950. $4,000. You better get $4,000. I'm at $3,950 to $1,4,000. You're out again, sir. $4,050. $4,050. $4,100. $4,150. $4,150. $4,150. $42. $4,200. You're out again. You better get $42, sir. You better get $42. $4,200. You're out here at $42. $4,250. $4,250. $4,300. $43. You better get $43. I'm at $4,250. You're out, sir. You better get $43. $4,300. You want in? You bought it, sir. Take the car out, driver. You better get $4,300. You better get $43.
This car has had an untold amount of publicity all throughout the country in connection with both the motion picture and this auction.
All right, the Godfather. And what do we get for it? Somebody going, I'm going to go, everybody give $10,000 bill, everybody give 10, everybody give 9, who'll give 8? Well, who'll give $5,000? 4, what'll you pay? 2,000, 3,500, 3,500, 35 now, 4. I'm at 35 and I want 4. 5,000? $5,000. No? How much you got? It's worth that just in publicity. Come on, I want 5. No sale. Take it on out.
A car either has it or it doesn't. And even the Godfather can get turned down.
Lot number 45, a 1912 Hudson Fadden. This is the biggest Hudson engine I've ever seen. This must be a very rare car because I've never seen one before.
More than $1.5 million worth of vehicles were auctioned. Cars purchased here will find their way all over the world. Some will go to museums. Others will take their places on the roads, in the shows, or at the starting lines in the world of classic motor cars.
You can come home at night and that thing and nobody will ever know it. 12-1. I got $12,000 bill. You want to get 12?
Many are sold. Others will wait another day to find a new owner.
Ladies and gentlemen, lot number 73, Allard J2X. They were tremendous racing cars. They're very rare as X-Series cars with the wire wheels and the side-mounted spare. It has been restored.
All right, how much for the Allard? Somebody going, we'll start it for 5. I'm buying on the ground. Let's go. $5 grand. Want 5,000 out of it. Everybody get 5. Everybody get 5. To go. Everybody get 5,000 out of it. Everybody get 5,000 out of it. Everybody get 5. Everybody get 5. Who'll get 4? That's 4,000. 45. 45. 45. Now $5,000. I'm at 45. I want $5,000. $5,000. I've got 5,000. You want to get 51? You're in for 51. I want 52. $5,200. $5,300. 53 now you can bid. 53. 53, 54. 53, you want to get 54, you want to get 4, 54, 55, $5,500, I'm going to get 55 here. 54, and I want 55. She said, go ahead, 55. She'll do without the kitchen for another year. 55, 56, 56. I've got 55, you want to get 56, I'm at 55, and I want 5,600. 5,600, 5,700, $5,700, I'm at 56, and I want 57. I have 56, you want to get 5,700 here, 5,700. 56 a bid, 57. Try it one more time. 5,700. 56, 57. 56 and now 7. 5,700. All through. Roll the car. So straight away, 5,600. Your number, sir.
Type 35A Bugatti. Partially here. Gas tank not here. Rear transmission engine complete. Some steering components missing. And of course we have 2 stolen hub nuts now. The rear is not new, but you can see it's in quite good condition. We do have the dashboard and the instruments.
All right, how much? Somebody get 10, you want to get 10, you want to give 8,000, everybody give 8 or 7. Who gives 7? Everybody give 7, everybody give 7,000, $6,000. 5,000, everybody get 5, everybody get 4, everybody get 4, everybody get $3,000. $3,000, you want to get 3 and now 31. $3,100, everybody get 31. $3,100, everybody get 31. $3,200, 32. I've got 31, you want to get 32? 32, 33. I'm at 33 and I want 34. 33, you want to get 34. 33, $3,400. Anyone else?
You know, it's nice to feel that the cars that are built today that may be classics of tomorrow and the classics of the past will be with us for a very long time. To the people who care for these cars, for those who drive, show, find and collect, and especially those who restore them, I take off my hat. Are you ready, Chris? We're off. Ciao.